Welcome to My Therapist Says, an interactive experience enriching your most important relationships. I'm Dr. Don Welch, your host and moderator. Let's face it, each and every one of us is challenged in at least one or more relationships at work, around home, in marriage, with children, and friendships. We all desire healthy relationships. Why then do some interactions ignite intensely negative emotions while other relationships nurture the more meaningful moments in life? During this next segment, relationship specialists will respond to questions from a live audience while offering practical solutions. It's like having your very own psychotherapist in your living room. I hope you will sit back, relax, and take in these life-changing insights. Please join me as we now connect with a live audience and My Therapist Says. We welcome you to My Therapist Says. I'm Dr. Don Welch, the moderator. And as we begin this evening, I'd like to do just a brief introduction. You may have seen and read the biographies of our two panel members this evening. Trina Nash is with us. As you know, she has been with Aaron Reinecke, who's sitting just to her left. In a previous My Therapist Says, they are collaborating, working together as a team. And they work with a number of groups and give numerous presentations. So we're so glad that Trina is back with us and to present this evening's presentation. And just to her left is Aaron Reinecke. Many of you may know of Aaron. He has one of the most longstanding professional Christian counseling centers in San Diego. His main office is in Mission Valley. Both of these individuals, their cards are out front, and hope that you would welcome picking up one of those cards if you have someone or yourself that is in need of working on these very important issues or other relationship issues. So we welcome both of you this evening. I'm always very proud of My Therapist Says, the quality of individuals that we have. We had broad announcement about this, not only here at this church, but across the county of San Diego. We're glad that you're here this evening to join us. And those who are joining us, again, via live streaming, we welcome you this evening, and we'll want to get started. So, Trina, do you mind beginning? Thank you. You're good.
Okay. I'm glad to see you all tonight. And as I present what it's like to discover that your spouse has been going online usually these days, or even using magazines still, has been using pornography secretly, what we hear usually is a wife coming in devastated. But I want to acknowledge that many times the shoe's on the other foot, and a husband can be devastated also. Women are seeking out sexual chat rooms and some visual pornography as well now. But often it's doubly shameful for a husband to acknowledge the hurt that's happening, and so they're still slower to come forward. But I want to acknowledge that tonight. I'm going to try to be gender neutral, but a lot of just habit is going to turn out with the wife discovering a husband's use. We want to start with kind of a role play. And so the scene will be husband and wife. The wife discovered her husband's pornography use a couple weeks back, and she just was floored and devastated and has spent the last couple weeks badgering him for details and information, trying to figure out the extent of what's happened and the reality of her marriage. He's finally actually told all. It took him a while. He gave piece by piece, and that's really typical. And so we just want to present what that might be like for them. This is his reality and her reality after discovery.
I am finally becoming a man of integrity.
I've been betrayed.
I've never loved her more.
I've never felt less loved or worthy.
I'm now beginning to see just how much I value our marriage.
I never realized how little our marriage meant to him.
Finally, I'm an honest man.
How could he live a lie like this?
I've never felt so hopeful about the future.
The future's never looked so hopeless.
I feel like a weight has been lifted off my shoulders.
I feel weighed down by all of this.
What a great feeling to not have to live in secrecy anymore.
I can't tell people about this. They won't understand.
This is the beginning of my well-being.
This is the end of my well-being.
She's beautiful to me.
I feel so self-conscious about my body.
I am ready to commit to this marriage.
I don't know if I can stay in this marriage.
I'm no longer acting out and struggling with shame.
He should be ashamed of himself.
My future looks bright.
My future looks dim.
I understand the healing process takes 3 to 5 years. I'm sure I can complete this process in just a couple years.
I don't think I can live with this pain for 5 years. So, trauma is a word that means wound or wounding. And what that role play showed is the trauma a spouse feels when they discover their partner has been involved in secret sin of pornography or any form of lust. And there's a wound on so many different levels. And I don't want to list them all to beat a dead horse, but to show the depth of the hurt and of the destruction. And when I work with women, I hear words like, I feel shattered. I feel my life has been destroyed. I feel like I've been stamped into the ground and I have to peel myself back up. So they're trying to describe the deep wounding. One level is a psychological wound where I can't really trust my sense of reality anymore because what I thought was real isn't real. And I can't trust my intuition anymore because I thought things were okay and they really weren't. Or I thought they weren't and I let my spouse convince me they were. So it's really shakes a person up to not be able to really trust themselves, and also a sense of worthiness can be shattered with this discovery. And then there's a relational wounding because a lot of times it makes it hard to trust other people. Maybe men become untrustworthy in general, and women because maybe there's often there can be women involved. Pornography can sometimes be the first layer of discovery, and then maybe there are other behaviors. But how could women participate in pornography or flirt with my husband? And so there can be anger and distrust towards other people. Spiritually, how could God let this happen to me? Could really sometimes shake up a person's faith. Sexually, there's a wounding sexually where suddenly if the spouse wants to hide, not change clothes in front of their partner, not have sex with their partner, and they feel very ugly, and if they choose to be sexual with their partner, that's often very tainted, and it's hard for them to enjoy the sex or be present to it. I'm having trouble reading without my glasses. Let me see. I need to borrow this. Thank you. Thanks. That's great. Emotionally, there is damage. Suddenly, instead of being able to peacefully reflect on life or have enjoyment and gratitude, suddenly there is rage and weeping and fear, and people just feel victimized by their emotions or deadness in the early season of discovery. So emotionally, there's damage. Mentally, instead of being able to focus on a task at hand or just just be present to one's life, suddenly your brain is hijacked by thoughts of what did the past mean? What were they doing when I was in the hospital? What were they doing when my children were sleeping and I was away? Were they using pornography? What will they be doing in the future? What does our future look like? What are they doing right now? They're not home on time. So suddenly a mind is hijacked. And maritally, what once was a source of comfort and security is now in crisis. Socially, suddenly there's such severe isolation when one feels uncomfortable sharing the depth of pain with friends because there's a feeling the friends won't get it, or you might be judged, or they might gossip, or you also feel like you need to protect your spouse's privacy. So there's such an isolating factor to this pain that there's social wounding. Circumstances can suddenly change. People can lose homes if there's a divorce, if there's legal problems involved, if there have been minors in the pornography. The timing, all of a sudden now there's maybe therapy happening, and so time and money and childcare, lots of disruption with this discovery. And then I put familial trauma because often each direction in the generations, like how do we tell our kids? Or what if our kids were the ones who discovered it? So there can be real upheaval there. And then do I tell my parents? Should I tell my mom, my dad, or my in-laws taking sides? So that can be a real source of pain also as the family gets disrupted. And then historical trauma gets reactivated if there have been earlier betrayals in someone's life or childhood. That intensifies the current wound. So these are all different layers of trauma that can happen with discovery. And there are specific stages of recovering from this trauma that have been noticed and documented, and they overlap a whole lot, and they all happen kind of at once, but some more than others at different seasons. So what I've done is put together a 3-year calendar to show how long a healing process can be from this type of wounding. Just a visual aid. 3 years is kind of the minimum average. Research shows that a sexual betrayal takes 3 to 5 years to recover from often. So I did some color coding. You can see it on the big screen. So the black is the first stage of recovery, which would actually be the crisis itself, and it can last anywhere from a day to several weeks, even a couple months, depending on how much is revealed at once. So if more trickles out over time, that crisis is still ongoing as the person takes blows and feels trust destroyed again and again. If it all comes out in one day, then that crisis moment moves by much faster. But this stage is marked with overwhelming feelings, sometimes just feelings of deadness, feelings of wanting to vomit, feelings of rage, feelings of devastation, just overwhelming roller coaster of feelings. And then that kind of all eases into the next stage, which I think I put as red, which is an angry stage. It's a stage of shock. And the truth is starting to sink in. And they're usually just mostly anger, all those still tears and the other feelings, but so much anger involved for months. And there's ambivalence. Do I even want this relationship anymore? And there's detective work, hunting on the computer to see if there's more happening or see if there was more in the past. Lots of detective work going on and monitoring. What's my spouse doing right now? Where are they? Checking maybe GPS on cell phones and things. And then that gives way finally to a painful grieving stage, which I believe I put blue for the grieving stage, where it's just deep, deep ache and weeping and still some flashes of rage, but just more going into the ache of the hurt, and then moving into a repair stage where the focus really becomes on changing what needs to be changed, maybe having new boundaries, maybe becoming more assertive and having a voice in the relationship, maybe dealing with learning new ways of being in the relationship that you hadn't known before. And then finally a growth stage, which really can last for years, or hopefully for life, where you're just really growing and developing in whole new ways, learning to be authentic in friendships and cultivate hobbies and do more self-care and kind of a new trajectory from where you'd started off living life in the way you did marriage and the way you did family, and then this crisis comes and you had to learn a whole bunch of new skills and cope with a whole bunch of new stuff, and now you're headed in this direction. And as you do good recovery work, it can become positive. But it's a long-term process. So what we recommend is to take an approach of watching and waiting rather than clinging or flinging. I made that up. I like that. So there's an immediate urge to either cling to the spouse and make a lot of love and be so sad together and we're going to get through this. And that lasts for a little while, but it usually fades out as the angry shock stage hits. Or there's also a very urgent feeling that I need to fling this relationship away. So rather than take either of those quick fix actions, I really need to just have a prayerful time of waiting, maybe plotting out 6 months to 9 months or so to just listen to the Lord. Sometimes the Lord says stay. Sometimes the Lord says leave. And so you need to really listen to Him instead of to that urgency. And then also you need time to gather information and learn the truth of the situation to make wise decisions. And you need time to observe what your spouse's choices are. Are they pursuing recovery themselves or not? So all three of those things are important before one makes a life decision about what to do with the marriage. So what can you be doing in the meantime while you're doing all this watching and waiting? You can start addressing the immediate needs. I listed 4 immediate needs here with the pictures. That first picture shows a fence, which indicates boundaries that can create safety. So there might be emotional safety needs, like, you might find yourself raging too much for the safety of the family or your own health, and you might need a time of separation until things settle down and get clear. You might need safety in terms of being sexual until there's STD testing done, if fidelity is an issue, or the boundary of using a condom for a season until that testing comes back. Hard boundaries to set, but meaningful and needed often. Boundaries about where the computer can be in the home to create a sense of safety and being cared for. Also, the footprints in the sand represent that old beautiful saying that, well, Jesus, where were you when I was going through this crisis? And he says, look, you say, look, there's only one set of footsteps in the sand. And he says, those were the times I carried you. So we need support, and we need people who can carry us and walk with us through this terrible situation and this painful season. So the first thing to seek out is going to be support, maybe a therapy group or a support group, a therapist, some dear, real, safe friends. And then there's also simplicity with the rocks. Just spoke to me of simplicity as you pick your steps carefully and prayerfully to take things off the calendar so there are no extra stressors, as this needs to be forefront as recovery. And the next thing is, as you face a choice, should I go right, should I go left, what should I do? The need for information. So maybe the information of what has been happening in my marriage, the information about, is this an addiction or not? What do we need to do? Those are some information points. Later in the stages, later in recovery, there are 3 areas that really can be worked on also, which bring a lot of richness and change and future safety, which is shifting the dependency from your spouse for your sense of well-being, for your finances, for your future, to the Lord and you. So the Lord can become your sense of well-being in a whole new way. You can become a source of financial security in case you need to separate. You can trust the Lord for your future and your children's heart protection rather than clinging just to the marriage. Those are some shifts that need to happen. And also, your own character weaknesses become clear in this crucible situation. Maybe the rage is bigger than you thought, or maybe old traumas become reactivated. Maybe old rules that you grew up with, like don't talk, don't feel, don't trust. Those types of things get readdressed and can be worked through. And a lot of people end up drinking upon this discovery because the pain is so great, or maybe they go shopping too much. Kind of soft addictions, we could call it, or start reading romance novels even more, just escapism. So some of these, maybe your own addictions get addressed. And the third thing there is to cultivate life. A lot of times I find that the people I work with need deeper, real friendships, need hobbies, need self-care. And their life has been all absorbed in either their marriage or their children. And so it's time to blossom. And when you do all this work, you can say, either way, I'll be okay. You know, whatever happens with my marriage is in God's hands now, but I know that there's a secure future for me. Grief and hard work, yes, but on the other side, I know I'll be okay. And that's what this recovery work does. It brings healing and a deeper sense of well-being than when all your needs are caught up in one person. And so that leads us to the abundant life God promises. He always holds that promise out. No one is doomed. And so when we do our healing work, no matter what our spouse chooses, God says, I have an abundant life for you. And so we need to keep pressing through until we realize it. And so that was what I wanted to share tonight.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Thank you. Would you join me in thanking Trina for this wonderful presentation? Thank you. Outstanding. And it's going to help us this evening as we deal with your questions. There are several questions that have been raised, and there may be those that are texting in questions as well. I'd like to start with this particular question. And again, if you do have a question, or if you've already presented your question, just raise your hand without a 3x5 card. One of our hosts will come and place a 3x5 card in your hand. And if you do have a 3x5 card that you have a question, please raise it at any time during the evening. Here's the first question, if we may dive into the questions here. And by the way, I noticed that you are close to being a certified sex therapist, which is a remarkable achievement. Am I correct?
Thank you. Oh, I have achieved it.
You have achieved it? I missed that. I'm so sorry.
Thank you. No, that changed.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you.
So wonderful. That we have very few of those in San Diego County. Are there other Christian sex therapists that are certified?
Yeah, in our office, there's 8 of us now, 7 of us now.
That are.
And I'm not really sure outside of that, but probably about another 7 or so around the county.
Very
probably.
Good. We know Dr. Jennifer Conzen, who is with us at Family Counseling Service. She is also certified, and they're going to be bringing a convention here working on that. So I'm so glad. I didn't know that many, Aaron, so thank you for that.
Now, there might be a little bit of a difference. Jennifer is a certified sex therapist.
Yes.
And what our certification is in a certified sex addiction therapist.
Certified sex addiction, okay.
Yeah. So Jennifer's training is really great too. She's got some really great skills, but the certification's a little different.
Okay.
Yeah.
That specialty is very important, and so I just wanted to highlight that. Forgive me for interrupting, but highlighting that skill base that is at Aaron Reinecke Counseling and Associates, right? So
we just say Reinecke Counseling Associates because really my wife
that's right.
part of it
Excuse
as well.
Me.
And she was a therapist before I was a therapist. We've both been in the field for 30 years or so. But
thank you.
But just in case Melinda watches this later,
yes.
I want to make sure and put that out there.
Thank you. That's Dr. Melinda, isn't it?
So Dr.
Yes,
Melinda, right.
We tease a little bit in our center. My wife, Robin's the CFO, so I always say that I have to behave because she could fire me anytime that she wants.
You bet.
But so we want to give that respect due to that person, your wife. So here's the question. What question should I ask my husband? This goes back a little bit to what you were saying, that if information tends to be downloaded incrementally rather than really shared immediately, that the question is, what question should I ask my husband so I can really know everything he's been doing? So what question should I ask my husband so I can really know everything he's been doing? You referred to that a bit.
Yeah, thanks. I'll start, and then this question actually has a lot to it. So first of all, I don't recommend that a lot of questions be asked, because detail, I know there's such a strong need to know feeling, and a lot of comparison starts happening when women ask, well, what types of women did you look at? Well, how old were they? Oh, did they have blonde hair like me? Or Did they have breasts bigger than mine? And they start, it's based in the sense of unworth that comes with this kind of betrayal. And so this itch to know, but then if you get the information, it's torturous. And then what happens is the scenes play in your mind. It's almost like you can envision the pornography now. And it's very hurtful. So it's good to protect your mind from the ugliness that you're hating that your partner watched. And so I don't recommend asking for details like that. And even asking for how much did you watch? When did you do it? How long has this been going on? If your partner is really open, that would work. But so many times, they're very guarded and ashamed and scared of what you might do with the information, scared of your reaction. So there's often a minimizing and only sharing a little bit to get their partner off their back for now. And that can be devastating to trust, because then when the itch to question comes up again and you start badgering again and they give a little more, well, gosh, you told me last time that you told me everything, and now there's more, so now I can't trust you even more. And so it just erodes the relational trust. So we recommend waiting with those questions and asking your partner to go do what he needs to or what she needs to become prepared to present it all voluntarily at one time. Often that requires the support of a therapist, sometimes a support group. Can help prepare that kind of a disclosure so that it's just all out at one time. And
can you help us with, when you say all, I want to ask a question, because this would be a question I think those listening would ask. When you say all at that point, are you saying giving enough information so the person, the other person, this would be his spouse, is aware of really what has happened, but not necessarily going into great detail? Could you speak to that? Because you said maybe sharing it all. What do you mean by that? Maybe that would help us.
That's right. You take that.
Yeah, there's a difference between discovery. That's when you find out that, something's happened here. He's been on the computer, and there's a problem. So you've discovered the problem, and then we really make a distinction between that and then disclosure, which discovery, now if you think about it, it's when the mate finds that there's a problem, and then she or he is usually very anxious, of course, and is looking for and trying to get more information out of the spouse, right? Okay, that's discovery. And that's distinct from disclosure, because the addict or the pornography user or the person who's has done the sexual betrayal has to have some time to collect himself or herself, and with the help of a therapist or a group, have some time to really go through everything, to talk through everything, to figure out, even remember sometimes some of everything that's happened, get the whole timeline together, and get it prepared to present it voluntarily to the spouse, rather than the spouse trying to get the information out of him. He is voluntarily giving the information. It's a very different emotional dynamic there.
One erodes trust, and one can build trust.
Right. And so, right, exactly. Well said. So then, in addition, there's the question of, well, what is the difference? What is all? What do we tell? And we believe in our center very strongly in full disclosure. The spouse deserves to know everything that really has gone on, the categories of everything that has happened, and that is certain. But what is not in his or her best interest is a lot of the details. So full disclosure, but not the details that are going to actually sometimes really cause some more psychological damage on the part of the woman or the man. For example, sometimes the spouse wants to know every place that some activity occurred, or did you ever go out to dinner with any of these people, or were you ever, and unfortunately, sometimes there's been something that has occurred, a dinner out, in one of their favorite restaurants, or, they used to, sometimes I'd walk along Seaport Village, and then that ruins that place for the couple from that point on. And so sometimes some of these details really aren't really necessary for healing to occur. And in fact, sometimes the details actually get in the way of healing really occurring.
This is why it's probably so important, really, with this kind of discussion, that the couple be under the care of a proven psychotherapist, someone who can walk with them and sense their need as a couple to help them balance this. Is that what you're saying as well?
Yeah, we don't want to seem self-serving here, obviously, but God has used this in a really great way in a lot of people's lives, and we do all that we can to train and to encourage, all the support groups out in the area, and right here at this church, there's some great things happening in that arena, and those can be really helpful as well. But very often, taking this to a trained therapist that specializes in this area is really almost essential.
Okay. This next question, it looks like someone took some great strides to type it and make it very clear, and it's longer than normal questions, but I'd like to read it. I think it's a very profound question and some statements. This is from the audience, of course. Men minimize lust and porn as no big deal. This person is saying all men lust. It's how God made us. It's nothing personal, nothing to do with your wife. It does not mean I don't love you. It's men being healthy men. It's what we do. Now, this is a person saying this from the audience. So there's quite a bit of pain that's being said here. That for women, it's adultery, betrayal of vows, searing, blinding us to the core pain, and men are quick to want forgiveness and start quoting God's requirement to forgive and work masterfully at making the spouse the cause of all upheaval and refusing to move on. And this person is asking the question, is this true of men? This is really the question. Are all men really this way? This person has quite a bit of significant pain. I've heard this kind of statement many, many times, and I'd like for you as professionals, could you address, is this true that number one, that all men lust? Is it true that that in your work, of course, for women, in this sense that this betrayal is blinding us to the core in pain? And then it was asking some other questions. But could you respond to that first one?
I'd like you to answer for the
Sure.
male part, but first.
Okay, first. Go ahead.
First, I just want to validate the pain on the woman's part. That is well said, the searing pain, almost impossible to put into words unless some thought and some time had been put into to describe what it's like. And I think it's hard for the betraying spouse to understand that pain. And then I also heard in this case that blame is being put on the spouse. And that's never true. Each person is responsible for their own actions and choices. And, I can be a poor wife, and that does not entitle my husband to sin. And so I just want to say that's inaccurate. And there was a third thing in there, too, that hit me. It was the last piece. What was that last piece?
The last piece is God's requirement to forgive, which you said, yes.
No, know, I just want to encourage the person who's been using pornography to not demand forgiveness, sometimes not even ask forgiveness, as that puts a load. That's getting the other person's spiritual business. Mm-hmm. God calls us to forgive. And if healing's going to happen, forgiveness is going to happen, but there's a time frame and a season, and it's not something we can demand of another. It's a gift offered. It's a blessing when it comes. but it's nothing that we can dictate from another person, and it would be very kind and respectful to just leave that between them and the Lord and let them bring it to you when they're ready.
Yeah, on that last topic of forgiveness, I want to tell a quick story. Melinda and I, my wife and I, years ago, and we've told this story in public a lot when we speak, but it's been so many years ago, I can't really remember, we can't remember even what it was about. But she was upset at me about something that I had done, and she kept going, I thought, from my perspective, she keeps going on and on about this. I get it. I already heard. Yeah, and I was kind of, I knew I was supposed to, just wait and let her get it all out. But finally, I just interjected. Oh, well, honey, I'm so sorry. Will you forgive me? And she got this look on her face, like, and then she said, well, no, because I'm not done being mad at you yet. Okay? And it just really stopped me, and I just realized, well, of course. Okay? And so then she finished what she had to say, and it was just another, as I remember it, just another couple of minutes. I was going to say a couple hours. No, it really wasn't. Just a couple minutes, a little bit longer, and then she was fine. And later she told me, Aaron, I really needed to tell you the whole thing because I really believe in you. I believe that if you really understood how this really hurt me, then you wouldn't probably do it again. Okay? That it would have an effect on your heart and it would change who you are a bit. Right? Now, that is very true with small things and with big things like this. And really, there's nothing quite as big as this. This is huge. Okay? This is not a small thing. Now, let's go to the question, I think, of do all men lust?
Yeah, but the small things might take just another couple minutes to explain the pain and to be angry against the violation. But the big things take a few months, several months.
I'm really glad you clarified that. Yes, because what I like to try to get my guys to do, and I work a lot with guys in this circumstance, is really to come to the place where they see that, as long as it takes my wife to come to a place where she's like finished with working through all the pain, I'm going to be with her all the way through this, whatever it takes, to have this kind of whatever it takes mentality. Because, some of us, we have that mentality, men and women, about other things. Like for me, basketball. It started with making the junior high basketball team. I just wanted to make that junior high, and I did just about anything I had to do to make that team, and actually I didn't make it. So then in high school, I had the same, it just spurred me on, and I made the basketball team in high school and actually played some, and it was, but I had this whatever it takes mentality. And, basketball is one thing, but life, marriage, that's huge, right? That's everything. So I like to get my guys to that attitude. All right?
Now, another thing, before we go to this idea of do all men lust and do all men behave this way, I'd like to talk just briefly about the issue of anger and kind of the resolve that you referred to, that we have to be careful, correct, of prematurely moving past the anger. One of the reasons for anger is for the person who's been victimized, if you will, in this, to be able to establish the fact that she had nothing to do with his behavior or behaviors. This is what we do as healthy people. We want to question ourselves, did I do something to cause this other person to go to a catastrophic place of behavior? And so that anger can be a real gift if it's managed well. And if we skirt around it or move around it, could we talk about this for just a moment? If we move around it too prematurely, too quickly, we've actually de-established, we've actually created an infrastructure crack in the process of healing.
Yeah, we've destabilized the healing.
Yeah, destabilize the healing. Right. I couldn't quite get the words out. Thank you, Aaron. Could you talk just a little bit about that? Because the one thing I experience so often with this work, and every therapist, of course, I'm not a certified sex addiction therapist, but I work with it often every day almost in my practice, that one of the issues that I find is that women will oftentimes take on responsibility they shouldn't. So I would even go to say if there was domestic violence where you were hitting your husband, which is an awful thing to think about, and most of whom I'm working with are not, but if you were hitting your husband and he behaved this way, you would not be responsible for his behavior, his actions, correct? So could we talk about that for just a moment?
Yeah, that's a strong statement, but it's true. Each person being responsible for their own behavior. Yeah.
It's an important concept because I see so many women that will want to take on the responsibility of her husband's actions. And she could even do that through anger, and it looks like she may be denigrating her husband in her words, but it feels like she's still feeling some level of responsibility. I wasn't good enough, or I didn't dress well enough, or I didn't behave well enough. I was imperfect, if you will.
I hear a lot of women before the discovery, or a lot of times with pornography, there's a discovery years before, and then it's supposedly addressed, and then they move on as if it weren't happening anymore, and then 2-3 years later they find out, oh my gosh, there's pornography again, or maybe still, and so it might take more than one discovery to really address the issue and bring it to the surface to be handled, because it's so painful. We want to believe the promises that it's over or that it's not happening. But there is a lot of self-blame, and women will try to do all sorts of things to manage their husband's behavior. Women will buy, more lingerie than they normally would, or do extreme sexual things, or view pornography with him, things they wouldn't choose for themselves, trying to get their husband to care for them and treasure them. They'll do all sorts of. They'll clean the house. They'll get the kids perfect. They'll do anything to be the perfect wife, thinking that will earn their husband's love and respect. And it never works, because love and respect are a gift that come from within the giver, not something that's earned.
Right.
So that's a choice that a husband is making. He's choosing to love and respect one or not.
Yeah. I would never suggest anyone go to violence activity. I was only trying to help to create a visual for someone, because they will take responsibility, and when we typically go emotionally hysterical, we go historical. So we go back and try to figure out, what did I do? How come I didn't meet up to the needs of my husband? That sort of thing. Thank you so much. Can we switch then to that particular question of this person related to the issue of men and lust?
Yeah, so some of you have heard me speak before publicly, and you know that this issue of pornography was really my issue myself from the time I was 11 years old, finding my older brother's porn in the house I grew up in, and I got hooked, and it had really a deep hook in me for a long time. And the earlier you start, typically, the more of an effect it has on your developing brain. And so I was convinced that I was always going to have to struggle and work really hard to deal with lust. My whole life, it was just going to be a struggle. And as time went on and I got completely healed myself, I've come to a place, and I've also seen many, 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 many men, hundreds of men that I've worked with, come through to the same place as well, that no, I am not actively lusting at all in my life. Now, there are temptations that come, thoughts that I have and so forth that I used to really struggle with. They still come, into my mind, but it's not the same kind of struggle and just this angst and difficulty to just let them go right on through my head like it once was. So it does not have to be your story as a man that you are a person who is just trapped in lust. It really has been the most difficult struggle of my life to become free like I am, but the benefits are just so astounding. You know, my wife now is completely the single source of my sexual satisfaction, and it is sweet. It is a beautiful thing, and it's the way God has designed it to be, and it took work, but I am so glad that I've put that work into it.
I have a thing to share as a woman. I think that husband could actually really believe what he's saying. And it could be a smoke screen. It could be just a big bluff to, be able to do what he wants to do and have his wife get off his back. But it could be his true belief, because my experience was I stumbled across some pornographic images and they shocked me. It was my first time since I was in high school, and I was curious and flipped through my friend's father's Playboys a little. I'm like, what? So that was decades ago. But then with the internet, suddenly I'm seeing these bare-chested women, very erotic, and it was horrible to my eyes. But what happened to me was, for about 2 weeks, I'm guessing, because I can't remember the exact time frame, women, not even scantily clad, just women would walk by, and my mind would see them naked. My mind would see their bare chest. And so I imagine if someone's been viewing pornography regularly, that's how their eyes operate. And then if that's how their eyes operate, they think, well, this is the way I am. This is how it is. This is how guys are. And so they could really believe that, but it's false. When you stop feeding it and start taking it captive, then I think your brain can go back over time to the way God made us, which is for purity. And he calls us to purity, and he wouldn't do so if it were impossible.
And I would agree completely with Trina. I would just say that time period is quite a time period. Okay? For her, it was just a couple of weeks or whatever it was. But really, guys, honestly, it takes, if you start when you're a kid, when your brain isn't developed yet, and you start putting this stuff into your brain, which so many of us have, and so many of us did, and kids today are starting younger and younger. It takes a good long period of time to slowly come to a place that you're different. And that process of doing that, I want to let you know that I did not do it well for a long time. I didn't understand how to do it well, like we understand it now. And I wish I would have had somebody that could have been a therapist or a guide for me all the way along that process, and it wouldn't have taken nearly as long. It would have taken maybe just 3 years or 4 or 5 years. It wouldn't have taken decades like it took me. So it's possible, but it's hard work. And it's not just a matter of hard work, but it's smart work, understanding how to do it well. And get into if you can't afford a therapist, get into the group right here at Skyline or somewhere around the county and link up with some guys that are doing it and learn how to do it. And if you're a wife and you need to get into a spouses group, then get into a spouses group. You're so much better off than trying to figure it out alone.
And if you're the spouse that's been betrayed, I just want you to know that your partner, 99% of the time, a partner is not going to be able to give up pornography in this day and age without outside help, without a mentor or a therapist or a program or a group. They're not going to be able to kick it on their own. The internet's too powerful, too available, into secret. And usually if they're, watched it this week in their life, they watched it last year and last year and last year. And so there's a pattern built, and it's been too big to kick because part of them feels bad too and wants to give it up and hasn't been able to. So know that if he's not bringing in helpers, that he's probably not going to be better long term. And that's information to know.
And you're making a good point about addicts. They have an inadequacy that it's very indigenous within them because they realize at the very core of who they are that it is not right and that it is unhealthy. So the pattern is the sense of acting out, inadequacy, acting out, more inadequacy until it's a ruminating factor that sears or tears at the very fabric of the foundation of the person. That's why it may be very difficult for the person unless they have help, professional help with the situation. Next question is, if an affair was short, this ties into what you were just talking about, If an affair was short, like a month, is the healing process still 3 to 5 years?
Yeah. It's because the betrayal is still searing and a deep wound. Just like we discussed, all those trauma factors can be active. Mm-hmm. So, yeah.
Okay.
The healing process now we're talking about, I'm thinking of it in terms of the person who had the affair or the person, the addict, looking at porn or whatever the case might be, okay? Now, I'm answering it from that perspective. I never had an affair. I never had any, physical contact with anyone. I never had, it was purely fantasy, porn, masturbation, okay? But the quality of my addictive nature, the way in which I was addicted was very, very powerfully, okay? And so sometimes people think, well, gosh, if you haven't acted out with another person, maybe the time period of healing is shorter. And if you have acted out with other people, then maybe it's longer. That doesn't have so much to do about it. It's really about the effects of the experience over time on the brain and what it's done to the brain. And that really there's assessments that we do every day in our office with, it's quite a elaborate, pencil paper, actually online test. It's a 5-hour deal to really assess where and just how addicted the person is and how they're addicted, and there's different kinds of addiction. But just because something only lasted a short time, it doesn't mean that there haven't been other behaviors that haven't been going on for a long time. And so it's kind of a big question.
Go right ahead.
Oh, sometimes there could be a one-time, 1-month affair also.
Right.
Yeah.
That wouldn't be as hard for the person to get over as someone that's never had an affair but has been addicted to porn for a long time. That person might take a lot longer to get better.
Because you're talking about the difference between healthily self-regulating or self-soothing. There's a big difference. If I'm self-regulating, I'm doing things that could be very healthy, like good nutrition, good rest, good exercise, a wonderful spiritual daily walk with the Lord. These self-regulatory behaviors create strong self-esteem, a sense of ego mass strength. However, usually addictions have other strings, like you said, other tentacles, if you will, that tend to collaborate or cooperate with that particular addiction behavior. And we're talking about pornography, betrayal here. So that's why I think you were saying that it tends to ignite other areas in the person's life. Keep in mind that when we are not self-regulating well, we will move to some sort of self-soothing. Mine is ice cream. I love ice cream, and if I'm not careful, my wife.
Ice cream doesn't count.
Okay, it doesn't count. Oh, it doesn't count. I'm really good then. Okay.
Either just chocolate.
Or chocolate. I'm in good company here this evening. I just feel so much better about myself.
You should come and see me every week, Don.
Oh, okay. I probably should, Aaron. I'll find out things I don't know about myself.
I had another thought that I didn't get to mention in my presentation. When we talk about a spouse's recovery, one piece is what we the trauma triggers. So the first months, they get triggered a lot. Anything can remind them of the hurt that was done. It could be a beautiful woman walking by. It could be their husband seeming to look at a beautiful woman across the room. It could be an ad on TV that, people in bathing suits. Anything. It could just be the beach. Mm-hmm. And suddenly, there's a world of pain reactivated. And so in the early months, if it's just been a 1-month affair or if it's been pornography, but the discovery is so painful because it says, I wasn't chosen, I wasn't protected, I was lied to and used, I don't feel beautiful, what's wrong with me? So much gets called into question. And so those early months, the triggering is pretty much constant. There's anger all the time. Just the spouse is the trigger. So every time you see your spouse, you're mad. And then with that anger is a fear of the future. What will happen to us? And then as the months go by, many months later, maybe you're triggered once or twice a day instead of every hour. And once or twice a day, suddenly you're very fearful and angry. Why haven't they called? Where are they? How could you look at her? I wasn't looking at her. So the triggering happens less. And then months later, maybe it's 3 times a week. And then later, once a month. And then somewhere down the road, like 3 years later, it could still be every 3 or 4 months, something reminds you. And maybe you're not angry anymore, but maybe there's that little ache comes back, or that little doubt about the future comes back. Or when you're making love, 3 years later, suddenly you're thinking, oh my gosh, did they look at this, online, what we're doing now? And so much is tainted, and it takes a long time for that stain to rinse out. And so the betrayal is what does it, not the length of time of what was done.
Right, because you talked about that earlier, that oftentimes when the betrayal is brought to the light, it's no longer in the darkness like you were saying. We're now moving toward John 10:10b instead of 10:10a. 10:10a says the devil comes to kill, steal, and destroy. So it's in the dark. But we're moving to John 10:10b when Jesus said, but I've come that you might have life and have it to the full, correct? So when it's brought to the light, the betrayal, there's a tendency, and you already said this, for in this case, the female who's been betrayed, she is now in shock and trying to figure out what in the world has happened. He's already, as you mentioned, both of you did in different ways, he's already moving forward. So they're not in the same place. And I think what I'm hearing you say, Trina, is that it could take quite some time for them to be on a parallel path. And there needs to be a large dose of patience.
Yes, it's so hard. I just recently came across in some of my materials that sometimes a fully disclosed and recovering pornography user or sexual addict, they can be up to a year ahead in recovery, and the spouse is having trouble buying in or getting past anger. And so there is such a disjointed season. It's really hard to negotiate, which is another reason that both need support. They need a guide, a therapist, a group, a friend who can help them, encourage them to be patient with each other, and to be wise in how they handle it.
Yeah, this is the most special gift God has given us, our sexuality. And so when there is betrayal, when there is a catastrophic issue now facing the couple, we do have to come together and have those join with us who are professionally, spiritually capable of walking and helping us walk through. That's why I invited both of these specialists here this evening. They're renowned within the San Diego area, and I'm so glad you're both here. I want to switch questions here. We have so many, and we're running short of time because this is so complicated. It's not easy to just go to the next question and the next question, because we could spend so much time on what we've already talked about, because we're in some ways not getting to some of the deep issues that we could if we spent just a little more time. Certainly, how do we help our children avoid the path that we, the person put I, chose at 12 years of age? How do we help? What a great question. How do we help our children avoid the path that we and the person put I chose at 12 years old? By the way, if I may just give a prelude to that, you'll see it at the end of tonight, but Dr. Jennifer Conzen will be with us, Todd Nicholson, who is the high school pastor here at Skyline Church, and of course I'll be here moderating the next, on May 5th, we have Talking to Your Children About Sex. So we are following this up on purpose with the next My Therapist Says on May 5th, talking to your children about sex. And Dr. Jennifer Conzen, I mentioned, she is also certified sex therapist who will be with us that evening. So may we go back to that question, how do we help our children avoid the path that we, the person said, or I, chose at 12 years old?
Great question, and come and hear what the speakers have to say next time, for sure. What I would say, first of all, is that you really have to work hard to get through this crisis yourself in your relationship, in your marriage, and really allow it. Work hard to let the Lord use it to really make your marriage better, if at all possible. And sometimes things just don't work out. I know how life is for some of us. But if there are difficulties in the relationship, really work very hard on having real attachment and close reconciliation between the two of you. And then, because your kids are going to see that, they're going to see the difference between what it was, and then as it heals, what it becomes. And really, it can become better than before. And your kids are going to, ideally, what happens, how the Lord uses it, is that they see the difference, and that gives you opportunity to. You don't have to disclose everything to your kids, but they see the difference between what it was and what it is. And they will be drawn to that difference. They will be drawn to that healthier version of the relationship. They will want it. I think the thing that, and we have 5 kids, and, look, no family's perfect, no kids are perfect, no parents are perfect, but one of the things that has been helpful to our kids is that they have really seen a pretty good quality relationship over time. And as I've talked with each of them, in their own way, except for one so far, he's not ready to admit this, but they want some version of what they see. That's what they want. And so how do you get that version, some version of what they see? Well, here's the healthy steps. And I've talked to all my kids, and my sons in particular, but also my daughters, as it's come up about my own story. And they know the basics, and they know that it didn't work well for me, and I had a lot to work on and overcome to have such a good quality marriage like I have. And you can avoid all of that pain if you really want something like your mom and dad have. Then just work at not giving in to this kind of a temptation, because it's not gonna get you there.
So the description really is the fact of how deeply soulmate connected you are with your mate. That great example for the children. They'll catch that. You don't have to teach them.
Yeah, attachment.
That attachment.
Good attachment breeds attachment.
Sure it does.
And what we say is, at our center, that we have to leave addiction and we have to learn attachment. Because it's so difficult for a lot of folks that have been bitten by the addiction bug to even understand what real healthy attachment is really like. But it's the adventure of life, my friends. It's such a beautiful process of learning how to develop close connection and attachment with a person. It's a beautiful gift, that God keeps unfolding, what it all means.
And one of the great things about attachment is if a person is really healthy, they have really good self-regard. positive self-esteem. You talked about, really, you might be referring to Claudia Black's book, It'll Never Happen to Me. In an alcoholic addictive family, you don't talk, you don't feel, you don't trust. Well, the opposite of that is attachment. And when we look at what Jesus did for us, he showed us exampled attachment. He did not withhold anything from his bride, but laid down his life fully. And if you think of that imagery, that is where at the very soul of who you are for that mate, you are willing to lay down your life. You can even go to the feeling, if you lost your mate, the feeling would be that you could not survive without them. Because you have this deep connection of which you are daily, moment by moment, giving to. After you have that relationship with the Lord, of course, you cannot have that soulmate place without that deepened, heartfelt relationship with the Lord, because that's where it's exemplified. And we can only go to the depths of attachment as we are attached to the Father who seeks that with us. But Trina, you were going to...
Oh, well, I was thinking, I give a talk at churches about helping kids be protected from pornography. And I do it with my partner, Corey, and he talks about protecting them on the computer with boundaries and filters and oversight. And that's really important. And then I take it away and talk about, well, they need to have internal filters for when they're with their friends or out of the home. And that's exactly the theme is placing sexuality within the context of family, like God designed it. That it bonds a husband and wife and creates children and is an expression of love. And so the kids need to believe in loving marriages. So when you say wait sexually for marriage, A, they need to believe in loving marriage and think, I want one of those for me. How do I ensure I get there? And B, you can talk about, this is going to be a great talk, how to talk to your kids about sex, because masturbation is a topic that's often awkward to speak about with kids, but it needs to be talked about because you can train your mind for purity through adolescence, because the purity switch doesn't get flipped on the wedding day. You either trained your eyes and mind well, and then it's easy. The temptations in marriage are manageable, or you haven't trained it. You've trained poor habits, and then you get married, and the poor habits continue. So you teach them, hey, you want one of these? Then you start now by practicing purity. And I want to say for girls, for boys, you teach them about guarding their eyes, and for girls, eyes too, but also fantasies of romance, the romantic stories and the fantasy of the man who will love them and make everything wonderful, the Prince Charming stuff. That's very detrimental when women get married and they expect their husband to be all that. And so to guard their hearts from too much romance in the stories and things.
That whole concept, that whole concept of guarding our hearts and minds in Christ Jesus. We have run out of time. I can't believe we could probably go another 4 or 5 days in this conversation. What a wonderful, we'd love for you to come back at another time, and we maybe could look at this from even a different angle. I know there's significant interest, those of you who are here or those listening from live streaming. We do want to thank you. Would you join me in thanking our panel this evening? Thank you. We're so glad that you came. And again, I just want to remind you that on May 5th, that's Tuesday, May 5th, 6:45 p.m. right here in this main auditorium at Skyline Church, that we will have Talking to Your Children about sex. This is not for children. This is only for adults, this event. And so we'll be talking very candidly with these professionals as we work together. Again, thank you for being here this evening. Our guests, our panel members, will actually be in the back. If you would like to greet with them, talk with them, ask questions about their center and how they may be of assistance to you or a friend. Oftentimes, you're the ones who come and you have friends that you're representing that might not be here for a number of reasons. And this would be a great opportunity for you to be able to talk with two real mature specialists in this very area. I'd like for us to end the evening with a word of prayer, thanking God for His presence. He'll be going with us, with you, and giving us wisdom and insight that we would not otherwise have available. He wants to give it to us on a moment-by-moment basis. Let's pray, shall we? Father, we thank you that in the New Testament you clearly articulate that you never withhold wisdom from the believer who asks. And we ask in Jesus' name, as we leave here this evening, We've heard from specialists. We've sensed your presence. We're going here with renewed hope. Some of us are going with some chagrined pain, pain that is seemingly leveling us. And we pray for your presence as we leave here. Your presence makes all the difference in each of our lives. And we pray for your wisdom. May we again have the ability to have an open heart, to be able to inculcate, assimilate, download, and apply with character. It takes character to do this, to apply your truths. We give you praise for what you are accomplishing because we have met together in your name. And in the name of Jesus we pray this. Amen. God bless you. Thank you so much for coming this evening.